Talk about Vagabond. How did you start it? Why did you start it? What is it?
Yeah, so...
Now you begin with what it is, for those
Yeah. So Vagabond Missions is a Catholic nonprofit. It's youth ministry to inner city kids. And so the kind of kids we work with, they're, some of them experience abject poverty in a really horrifying way, and some of them are just experience the poverty that Mother Teresa talks about, with just the loneliness, the neglect of feeling unnoticed. Like I always say, the thing that I can't stomach is just this idea, for me or you, if you started like being malnourished, I'd say, Matt, man, you look horrible, which I said this morning, but you're not malnourished, but like, someone, you start to notice things, and you start to say, man, I notice like you haven't been yourself lately or whatever. But it's a whole nother thing to be starving to death or, metaphysically starving to death, and no one even notices, so Mother Teresa in this, her saying, the greatest poverty is be unwanted, unnoticed, it's just like, there really is nothing sadder than that just this idea that not only are there people, we all know this, that there's people that are in the world, that are even in our own country or cities that are starving to death, that are dying, that are, spiritually shriveled and crippled. But there's also people that no one notices, and those are the people we try and work with in Vagabond. We work mainly with young people, mainly high school age. A lot aren't in high school. Some will be in gangs. Some are kids that are in high school that have special needs. Some are just lonely. But like, we really want the kids that maybe have been pushed to the margins or rejected even by schools or churches. Like we want, like we feel like our special calling is to work with the lowliest of these, like in our country and in the States, and so that's what it is. And as far as like how we got involved, I think a lot of times when people see me, even when they might see like a thumbnail on your thing, oh, this guy probably has a crazy story, like I was sniffing crack off the curb, 5 years ago, and here I am at Pints with Aquinas. And the reality is, like, I grew up just in a white suburban neighborhood. I'm not, I don't really have a crazy story. I met Jesus pretty young in my life. I have ups and downs like everyone else, but this was not, like a thing of circumstance where it was like, well, Bob's, from the inner city, and so he should work with inner city kids. Really, it's more of a story, kind of what we were talking about as far as missionary activities. Just I fell in love, and what happened was, me and my wife, Kate, we got married the night I finished school. I had a final that day I finished school, and then I got married on a Friday night. Left Steubenville. I was at Franciscan, and we moved to New York, and we started working. Go ahead.
New York City?
No, we're in Schenectady. It's a couple hours north of New York City. And the funny thing is, yes, it's like I went there to interview, and the pastor said, oh, this is kind of an urban area. But he was 74. His name is Father Brucker, and he's still his greatest boss I've ever had, But this guy was like, it's kind of an urban area. And we went to Mass that Sunday when we were interviewing, and it was just a sea of like white-haired Catholics. It was like, look. I just thought, like, here's an old guy who thinks this is like inner city or whatever.
Right.
But, a couple months into us being there, and it was just, now they had no youth ministry or anything like that, but we just, we had an old abandoned convent on the property, and we started like just doing stuff. We'd play loud music in the parking lot, have pizza, and we'd do just stupid loud things outside. Then we'd all get them to come inside. We'd have mass, stuff like that. And tons of kids were coming out. But it was like just what you would imagine, like the stereotypical, like they were just fights, drugs. The police were there like every week. And like, honestly, I wish I could be like, and we were up for the challenge. We wanted to save these kids. But like me and my wife, like we just, I remember like crying a lot. It was our first year being married. Bob Rice lived like 30, 40 minutes away, and he had this little parish that everyone skipped around and held hands during mass. And, it was like beautiful little like.
Sounds worse than what you had.
Yeah, but it was cool, like in the sense of like it was this like small world after all, like beautiful little scene where everyone was loving Jesus and doing hand motions, the songs and stuff, and you're like, oh man, that seems so neat, and we wanted like just to make an impact, but we didn't want to be inconvenienced, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing. I remember being one day I was in Atlanta, doing some ministry there, and my wife, who was like 8 months pregnant, was leading the Bible study, outside of the parking lot, and she called me. And she was like crying. She's like, the police are here. There's 2 vans. They're throwing kids in the vans, because this one group came over and started fighting the kids that were in Bible study, and it was just like, it was so shocking. I remember one time we did a New Year's Eve lock-in, which, I mean, lock-ins are just the most horrible like concept.
Are we still doing that in youth ministry? Was that just a 90s thing?
Lock-ins.
Or early 2000
how
thing?
horrible is that? But anyway, we did like a midnight basketball tournament at this lock-in, and these kids got in a fight. And then this one kid pulled out like a box cutter, and they were like circling like it was a West Side Story, And then I was like on the phone with my friend Aaron. I was like, I gotta go to a knife fight, And so there was a lot of like crying and like, man, what the hell did we get ourselves into? It was like that scripture, like, you duped me, Lord, I let myself be duped. And it definitely was the Lord moving, because it wasn't what we were looking for. But at the same time, like, what changed everything, the entire trajectory of our life, and the birth of Vagabond was like, we fell in love. And this is what, like, I think like one of the big issues with the church right now, or the politicization of of Catholicism right now, is it's like we're in these camps of like, you're a social justice warrior, or you're a rad trad, or you're this or that, or you're Republican. It's like all these camps, and like, God forbid you be in the camp of like the poor, because it seems like you're weird, or you're liberal, or you're this or that, and the thing that changes everything for everyone is if you fall in love. Like I try and explain just on like a very earthy sense, like when we fall in love, we all have memories of being in junior high, fall in love with some girl, and you'll do anything, what I mean? Like you'll skip playing football with your buddies to bake cookies with her because you're in love, like, and like, I think like it's almost an ingredient of sainthood is just falling in love. Because when we fall in love, we start doing crazy stuff, And so I feel like if you're like, man, what do I need to do to be a saint? I wouldn't say like it's like read these 18 prayers every day. It's just like, dude, find some way for you to fall in love, for your heart to like be shaken awake, and to the place that you could fall in love. And so that's what happened with us with these inner city kids, is like we went from like banging our head off the wall, crying, what did we get ourselves into? Like, we need to apply somewhere else, to like, we are in love. And, that first year there were like 20 kids that went through RCIA, and, like it was from like tears of pain to tears of joy to like, man, these are kids that are unnoticed, and like the church, for whatever reason, whether it's lack of resources, lack of knowledge, lack of interest, whatever, is easy for these kids to fall through the cracks.
Lack of love.
Yeah. And for them to like just be passed over, like, because they're weird or smelly or special needs or this, or they're mean, or they look weird, and our hearts started to break, and we started to fall in love. And there was this point like where I feel like me and my wife Kate were like, this is what we want our lives to count for. And it was at that moment that, like Vagabond was born. Like we didn't, everything didn't just, spring up out of the ground, but it was something that like, I feel like this was a moment that we were like, we want this to be, our legacy, but also not for a sense of like, because I want people to remember this, but because like, it fits with me, like I'm a weirdo. You know what I mean? And like there's so many like weird, quirky things about inner city youth ministry that I feel like sometimes when people are giving me accolades of like, oh, what you do, for the church, or what you did for, I could never do it, thanks for, and I like that, because I like words of affirmation, so I'll take it. But like, to be honest, I always kind of say like, man, this is just God being good to me, because I don't know what the hell else I would do with my life. Like, I thank God God gave me something weird to do, because I'm weird, and I feel like it's like, these two worlds coming together. The world's needs, like the way God made my heart, and so that's kind of how it birthed. But now it's in lots of different cities, and we have like 50, 60 missionaries, and people are doing this, throughout the country. And it's really like there's been hundreds now of these kids who have become Catholic, that have been baptized, that have found a home in the church and in this nonprofit. And it's like the most beautiful thing. Like, there's just...
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.